much, goodbye. So, me being me, the next day I rang up again and said, you know, I really would like this job, whatever it is, at your studios. And again, they went through all the different questions and said, you know, you're not suitable, thank you very much. The third day when I rang up, I think they were so fed up with me, they passed me on to somebody else, probably Mike Trim, and I think he felt sorry for me and said, look, come to the studios, we'll show you around, show you what the job's involved, show you for once and for all you can't do it, and thank you very much, we got rid of you. So I went along to the studios, I'd had a wonderful tour of the studios and got to the point where they showed me this huge backdrop that was probably 20 foot high by whatever long, with painted sky on it of storms, and way out of my league. And so they showed me in the room, ready to show me out to the main gate and get rid of me. And I think Mike Trim said, have you got anything else by mistake? And I see his eyebrows raised, that you want to show us. And I said, oh, I've got a model in the boot of my car. So I went and got this model out of this house that I made, a scratch build model with somebody that... And he looked at it, and he scratched his head and he said, hang on a minute, and he went out and he brought back another chap who I now know was Derek Meddings, but I didn't at the time, and they both mumbled under their breath, and then turned around to me and said, when can you start? And I said, as what? And they said, as a special effects model maker. And 2 weeks later I was working at Thunderbirds. So I got a job quite out of the blue, really. I soon realised that nobody had told you what to do. You were just put on to making something and left to do it. Remembering in those days we had no computers, there was no way of researching anything whatsoever. So when somebody said in the morning, we like this made, like that made, you had to think, well, how do I get reference on it? You might run down to the local estate agent and pinch a few brochures off the shelf so you knew what a temple looked like or something else looked like, but basically there was no help whatsoever. And you were working with your hands. If your hands couldn't produce it, then it didn't appear on the television screen. And yes, I started working then and worked at the studios till they closed down at the 1970, at the end of 1969, at the end of UFO. Worked on well over 100 different episodes, I suppose, from Thunderbirds right the way through to Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, 2 feature films for Thunderbirds, of course. Fantastic time.
So at what stage did you join Thunderbirds?
Quite late. It was fairly late in the series, so they were winding down on probably the last few episodes. The feature films were still real up and running. I mean, Thunderbirds' 6th feature film we just started making. So, and they knew that Captain Scarlet was coming at the end of the Thunderbirds series, or seemed to. So you'd be working on something on Captain Scarlet, and then somebody would ask you to go and work on something on Thunderbirds, and then you come back to something on Captain Scarlet. And that was quite confusing. And of course, working with Thunderbird 2, it was falling off its wires all the time because it was so heavy and difficult to fly. And every time it fell off, a bit broke off here and a bit broke off there, and they come rushing in and saying, we need this wing stuck back on, we're all waiting to film, and blah, blah. You've got to try and stick it on quickly with some catalloid resin and then touch it up again in the evening when everybody's gone home. But it was a time when Thunderbirds was probably winding down as a series, so I wasn't able to really capitalise on all of the programmes, but obviously the feature films were quite magnificent to work on and quite impressive.
Oh, that's good. So when you were asked to make a model, were you given drawings?
It varied really. I might have something like Mike Trim, who's a visual effects creative designer, would come in and put something down on my workbench at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, we need that made by tomorrow afternoon. And it could be anything. A typical example, which is in some of the books I've done, is the Captain Scarlet, where I had to make a pub alongside a canal, and the pub had to be a sort of Tudor design, very old, had to be ready in less than 24 hours from start to finish. And what do you do? And first of all, you've got the drawings and you can see that it's going to be shown from a particular angle, so you know that the director's going to film it from that angle, so you only need to build that wall and that wall. You don't need to build all the other walls. You only need to build that part of the roof and that part of the roof because he's not going to see all the rest of it and so on. So you'd work round what's going to be filmed and made as little as you needed to. And then you just get out sheets of cardboard, sheets of plywood, a piece of perspex, boom, 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 stick them all together, paint, dye, dirt them down, a bit of this, bit of that, and lunchtime the next day you had a Tudor building. But at any time, you could be asked by the director to make anything to go in front of the camera. So they could be ready to film, everybody's set up, the lights are there, and the director would suddenly think, I need an extra piece of fencing on the left-hand side to cover that up, and go and get a bit. And they'd come into our store and try and find a piece, and can't find a piece. Well, get them to make it, we need it now, you know. And so you'd have to make a piece of fencing while they're waiting to film. And of course the whole camera crew is depending on this stupid piece of fencing that you're making that goes in front of the camera. So you could make anything at any time, and it wasn't just dirting down beautiful old spaceships all the time. I like working on more buildings and things like that, but anything could be thrown at you to have to create. And of course, without computers, just a simple sign that said nuclear power station could take you a couple of hours to do with electroset and rubbing down and making the background. Now, I mean, I could do it in 2 minutes on the computer and it looked better, but it was, if you couldn't do it with your hands, you couldn't produce it, basically. That was it.
So was your work more buildings than vehicles?
I tended to prefer buildings. I think Mike Trim realised that. So I'd get probably the option of working on more buildings than other people.
Yeah.
But that didn't mean that, you know, somebody wouldn't bring in a Rolls Royce or a spaceship and you'd have to make that sort of work as well. So no 2 days are ever the same. They really, really weren't. But Mike Trim's drawings sort of helped know that it was going to be, if the director suddenly decided they wanted to film something a different way, whoosh, the whole building went out the window because it was already played and be filmed on one side. So everybody had to work around Mike's sort of drawings, really, Mike Trim's designs.
So if you made a building that needed to be blown up, were there any techniques that helped you?
Well, everything was filmed at high speed. One of Derek's insistences was that we hired these high-speed Mitchell cameras. Films normally projected about 24, 25 frames a second. We were filming at 160 frames a second. So one quick bang was slowed down to a 20-second bang. And you never quite knew, when everything flew off and went past the camera, you never quite knew what was actually on that bit that flew past the camera. But the next day when you sat in the theatre, you found out what was on it, and it had the word sellotape written right across it as it came right across the screen. And you think, oh dear, of all the bits in the world, that sort of ruined the shot. But you make buildings to try and explode and break in what you thought was the most realistic way.
Yeah.
And of course, if at the end of the day, the director and the guy that's actually making the explosives was putting too much dust in the powder colour in the actual explosion, then one bang and you couldn't see a thing anyway. It was just all smoke, you know. And your building that you spent hours and hours and hours working on was blown to pieces, but nobody actually really saw it. So it was luck. It's all pot luck, really. Pot luck.
So how did you feel about having all your great creations being blown to smithereens?
It was quite weird to think that you sat there and you made something for a day or so, and you were never going to see it again because it was going to get blown to pieces. And in some instances, you'd have a model that was partially destroyed, and the director would cut, and everybody rushing with their fire extinguishers, and oh, thank goodness I saved that particular building that I made. And if it has to be reshot after tomorrow's viewing, at least I can clean it up and tidy it up. But no, the director's not happy with that. You know, we're now going to pour petrol gel all over the top of it, and we're going to set fire to it and action, and there it goes up in flames again for the second time. And all right, cut, in they come again, and there's hardly any of it left. And then, of course, that's it. You like, right at the end of the day, you said, right, okay, now the final bang, and you can't even see what I built. That's gone. You know, it doesn't exist anymore. But you live with that. I mean, I suppose that's what you were there for, to make it all work. Very, very little really survived. I mean, it all got either burned, destroyed. Most of the vehicles were all burnt on one side, and we only filmed them from one side because the other side was completely burnt, and we never turned them around. That was often the case, really. But yeah, it was. You live with it.
Did you ever have to make multiple versions of the same thing in case they had to do retakes?
No, not really. I can't think of any instances. I mean, most times if it didn't work, you knew by 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning, went in and sat there in the theatre with Derek and the other guys, and you watched your rushes, and you never quite knew what you were going to see until it came up on the screen. You spent a day making something, they'd spent 15 seconds filming it, and suddenly one big bang, and now you've got to watch and see what it will look like. No, it was very sort of vague to sort of pin anything down, really.
Yeah. So, if you had to say which was your most favourite creation, what would that have been?
Creation. How many times have people said, what was the favourite one you were working? I actually like working on Joe 90 because I found working on Captain Scarlet was a little bit dark, and from a special effects point of view, it wasn't too exciting. Many of the episodes had similar sort of shots, lorry going left to right along the scene, crumbs off, crashes, blows up, the same thing next day. So it was a bit sort of repetitive, I suppose. When we got on to Joe 90, because he is what he is and he had his imagination, we were able to get far more sort of creative work done. My own personal favourite was the Wild West Joe 90, because we now went back to almost Thunderbird days. We had a Wild West dream scene. I was asked to build a Wild West town, and I had, I think, about a day and a half to build it. And it was just sheets of wood and plywood, and a saloon and a barn and this and that, and they all went along the street, and they all joined onto one another, and all just two-sided from bits of cardboard. We got tremendous amount of fun out of making that, and I can remember virtually every scene that was shot in that, and it was filmed with a different feel to it altogether. One particular scene where I think the car with the people in it are escaping alongside the railway track and the train's coming through, and they had to get a shot. It showed it on the storyboard. Very low angle of this train coming through at high speed, and this Monty Ford coming across in front of it, skidding and going alongside the actual train. So, right, okay, and the set's probably no longer than this room, I suppose. And the director's got to decide, how am I going to get that shot? I mean, you can't pull the dolly up and down and so on. So we just got a piece of wood, 6 inch by 9 inch post, put 4 little wheels on it, and stuck the camera on it, and it was about 1.5 inches off the ground. Yeah. And they put the camera on the piece of wood had a bit of 4x2, and they stuck the camera on it, and so it's action, started the camera up, the train came along, and they just pulled this piece of trolley along, bounced up and down on the concrete floor, and did it about 6 times. And then we looked at it the next day in rushes, and wow, you could have been on a dolly with half a dozen people filming it, and so it just worked perfectly. No one would have told you to do that the day before. That was just purely the director thinking, that's the only way I'm going to get this shot, because I can't think of any other way to do it. And it worked. And that was I think the secret and the beauty and the wonder of making it all happen.
Yeah.
So I think, Joe 90's probably got some of my favourite sort of touches in it.
That's interesting. I think Vic this morning said Joe 90 was his favourite as well. So. Yeah,
I think because from the special effects point of view, it's probably totally different to puppets sometimes, but with special effects, you can have a series that's all action and lots of different vehicles and so on, like Thunderbirds was. You move to the Empire State Building one day and you're doing something else. But when we got on to Captain Scarlet, we didn't have that sort of licence and fun. And you'd look at the shot and think, oh, it's almost the same as one we did yesterday. Just, instead of a lorry, it's a whatever. So Joe 90 opened the doors up for us and gave us the opportunity then to visit different places and rocket sites and you know, aircraft hangars and all sorts of things where we could actually use a lot more imagination and creativity, I think.
Were there any items made for Thunderbirds that ended up in other programmes?
Oh yes. Yes, we use everything over and over and over again. So, I mean, I think the main building of Lady Penelopes was repainted about 5 times and used in all sorts of episodes of Captain Scarlet right through to Joe 90. Used as a concert hall and used all. But whenever the director's got a shot to do, if we take, for instance, the model I made for Captain Scarlet of a old English pub, we may be shooting a Joe 90 episode where they've got Tudor-looking buildings and they need something at the end of the road down there, sort of semi-out of focus, that just blocks off the rest of the studio, really. And so somebody would come in, we had all these a mezzanine floor just above where I was working, and that was just packed solid with everything that had ever been made that survived. So you'd have a Stingray alongside a Captain Scarlet vehicle, alongside a Thunderbird vehicle, all in a row, you know. You never gave it any thought, you just climbed up there and all up there. But everything else was also thrown up there, every bit of fencing, every bit of signage, whatever there was. And of course, if the building was finished with, like this one I'm talking about with Captain Scarlet, that would have been just chucked up on the shelf as well, until one of these special effects team came along looking for something to do a gap, grabbed it, came down, how about this, stick it in there. So I often see bits of my work appear in all sorts of different programmes, but they're not featured, they're just tagged on the end to sort of fill the gaps.
So it's going to be our challenge to watch these shows and find where things have appeared multiple times.
Yeah, they have.
I can see that making a great YouTube. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's often been talk that things ended up in the skip. So how was it decided if something was to keep in store or just be thrown away?
If it wasn't burnt, it was kept, basically. I mean, burnt as in nearly everything was ended up in an explosion, whatever episode it was in. But when it got to the end of 1969, and we got a note in our pay slip 2 weeks in hand to say the studios are closing in 2 weeks' time, which I think blew everybody away, because I think we were all waiting for the second episode, second series of UFO, which didn't happen. And instead the industry was on its knees, and Lou Grade, as our boss, just said, that's it, we've had enough, just close it all down. And he employed an outside company to come in and drop all their skips outside the offices and take sledgehammers to everything that was inside, smash it all up and put it in skips. And that's exactly what they did day after day while you're just working, finishing something off, they'd be smashing this up, and you go home, and on the way to the car, in the car park, you'd see all your buildings or whatever it was just piled up, smashed to pieces, really. And in a way, although it was sad, I mean, who wanted them? They were only buildings for a 60-year-old programme now, but it was like, you couldn't imagine anybody ever putting any sort of sentiment behind what was actually being made. But it's sad from my point of view, because I looked at things and I remember making that castle, I remember making that for Joe 90, I remember making that for Captain Scarlet. And there it was, sort of all being piled up and crushed to pieces in a skip.
So how many of you would have gone to those skips and picked the bits back out? A lot of you. And some did, I know.
I did in the end. I thought this is stupid. People were taking bits out all the time. And I think on my very last night, I came out and there was a shoebox hanging on the end of the skip and a leg hanging out the end of it. And I opened it up and it was a full Scott Tracy in his dinner jacket. In his original dinner jacket, exactly as he'd been filmed on the last scene. I thought, well, toy to have, isn't it? A bit of fun. So I hung on to that and put it in the car. And there was another box there that was packed full of dolls' clothes. I thought, oh, then I recognised that it was entirely Lady Blender's wardrobe, virtually everything she'd ever to the wall, all in a cardboard box. I thought, well, that might be fun to keep. So that went home, that went in the loft for 20 years, because nobody wanted it. The Scott Tracy became a play toy for my two sons, Martin there sitting in the front, who enjoyed swaying from one side of the room to the other, day after day, yes. Because who wanted a Scott Tracy, original?
Yeah.
Until one day, I think in the newspaper, I saw, whatever it was, one of the big agencies in London sending heads on their own, and the money that they were after was absolutely phenomenal. And I thought, whoa, stop trying that. Give me back Scott Tracy. So I had him restored, Chris King did it, back to his original condition, repaired it a little bit, put him on a plate, and he looked immaculate. He looked as if he had just come out. And I lent him to I think it was the British Film Studio on the South Bank. And they put him in a big glass cage, all the spotlights on him, and original Scott Tracy, blah, 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 made a big thing of it. Until Peter Jackson came over from New Zealand, who was a massive Thunderbirds fan. He's probably got the biggest museum of original Thunderbird items in New Zealand. He saw it at the film museum and said, who's it belong to? I got an email within a day or so saying, how much do you want for it? Wow, that sort of knocked me back, and I thought, do I sell it, don't I sell it? Here's a man that's got money, it's all tax deductible probably, it's going to a good home, do I keep it because it's Scott Tracy, or do I sell it? So I gave him some ridiculous figure that was outstanding, outrageous, and he just came back and said, what's your bank account, I'll give you the money tomorrow. And they didn't even arrange to pick Scott up for another 6 months, which I thought, wow, that's a bit. Suddenly I realised I had something in my house that was a bit high risk insurance-wise. But yes, so I went out to New Zealand, and that's where he is now in the museum out there. Sorry. Oh, and the Lady Penelope box with all the clothes in it. Well, of course, who wants that? Nobody wants that. The entire wardrobe. So I had an aunt who's a school teacher, and she came to visit one day and said, on Fridays we let all our children, especially the little girls this high, all bring their dolls in, and they dress all their dolls up in all their clothes and have a fun day. I've got a box of old clothes upstairs you could probably have. So I went upstairs and dug this box out of the wardrobe with all these clothes in it and gave it to her, and somewhere in East London there's probably some lovely dolls dressed up in Lady Penelope's clothes. And that's what they want. And I mean, wouldn't like to put a figure on what that would be worth, really. Unbelievable. So we had some fun.
Did you have any techniques when making these buildings of how to make them more realistic?
There were techniques, and techniques really changed with the materials, because you started off with buildings. You started off basically a sheet of perspex, and you might put cardboard onto the front of that to give it some character, and then put some wood onto the front of that. But then we got things came into DIY market, like the rolls of very thin polystyrene that you could put on your walls before you put your wallpaper on to make it insulated. But this polystyrene was fantastic, because we could now put a sheet of cardboard and then put the polystyrene onto the front of that. You've got the whole stuff out for the windows. And if you wanted now an old building with a bit of texture on it and a bit of crumbling here, I mean a little bit of that, and suddenly it's broken away and you've got this lovely bit of rough brickwork, and it's so simple. And polystyrene generally was the biggest innovation, because I used to make lots of things out of polystyrene, temples, churches. I mean the church for Joe Knight did, so which is an old cathedral of ruins. I just took normal sheets of polystyrene, which were new on the market, with a very sharp knife, cut out all the different shapes I wanted. You stick them all down on a piece of cardboard. If bits broke off, it didn't matter because it was ruined. And then when you finished it, you took a blowtorch, and you very carefully went over the blowtorch, went over the polystyrene, and bits of the polystyrene shrunk and changed shape and so on. A bit of paint on top, and you've got an old castle ruin, a church ruin in a day or so created. But the material made it work, because you couldn't have done that in wood or whatever. So polystyrene generally, all the rocks, all the icebergs, all everything else, always made out of polystyrene. And if we had a desert scene one day and scene where the next day was in snow. It was exactly the same rocks, but one day it's covered in sand and orange powder paint, and the next day it's dusted off and it's covered in salt and white powder paint, and it's the same rocks, just covered in a different colour. But the polystyrene was a base that we stuck with, and right to the end we used that very successfully.
Because I hear a lot of the models use the Airfix kits, so was there any things that helped you along with your work?
Airfix was a very, very, very big contributor. I'd go direct to the Airfix factory that was Woolwich, I think, in those days, and we'd go in and they'd show us around as VIP guests, and they'd show us all these beautiful galleons and things that were on the market just come out. We weren't interested in any of those, and then we'd suddenly see a girder bridge kit, you know, and we'd say, we have 500 of those, and they'd look at you as if you're absolutely mad, you know.
Yeah.
Who on earth would want 500 girder bridge kits? We take them all back to the studios, cut them all open, pour them all into a big cardboard box, and somebody said one day we need an aircraft hangar, you go in and bit by bit by bit by bit, and you build this imaginary crane, imaginary wall, whatever, out of Airfix, and it just works. It works so easily and made life so simple. Bit of paint, bit of dirting down, and I mean, so many of the original Thunderbird sets are covered with Airfix, and yeah, it saved probably 80% of the time it would have made to do it any other way, and it looked so real.
You're obviously brilliantly talented at model making.
Mm.
Where did it come from? Oh, we disagree. Where did that talent come from? Were you
I was always creative, and I always liked making things, but I never had the opportunity to express it, I suppose, until I worked for Thunderbirds for the first day.
Yeah.
I think I can remember going for a job as in architectural model making, which couldn't have been more opposite than Thunderbirds, because it's absolute precision down to the last, millimetre of cutting out perspex and so on. And I stood there and I thought, wow, this building's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's made for a company that's going to sell this office block for £20 million or something. But the model looked fantastic. Thunderbirds, I mean, couldn't be more opposite, because you a day, you throw it together and it's going to be blown up, so forget about it. But because nobody ever told you what to do, nobody said, this is your job and this is the way you're going to do it. You would just put it at your desk and give them something to do. And I think because it was hands-on, no computers, no other means of creating what we were doing, I just picked it up as I went along and had a semi-natural talent for loving to do it, really. And the more I did it, I think the more I enjoyed doing it, and the more probably we all spend too much time on things. We spend a whole day on making something look beautiful, and it represented 1.5 seconds on the screen.
Yeah.
And you think, well, why did I bother? But it did look real, that's the main thing. And you just get a satisfaction out of finding a new way of doing something all the time. That was continuous. All the time you were learning a new area of model making, or the dirting down, which was probably more important even than the actual model. Because anybody can make a model, but then to make it look as if it was exactly 150 years old or whatever, was the art, and that's what I enjoyed doing very, very, very much.
Was there any techniques in doing that, in dirtying down?
Techniques. That finger. There were tricks. I mean, if we suddenly, I had a submarine to build one day for Captain Scarlet, I think, and a huge top of the submarine, and of course it had to have hundreds and hundreds of riveted panels all the way across it to make it look real, as well as lots of other things. And you think, well, hang on, if I'm going to put rivets all the way around there, then all the way around there, then all the way around there, it's going to take 3 days just to do the rivets alone. So you think, how can I do that in a quicker way? And you suddenly think, I know. And you suddenly think of a cog, and the cog's got all the spikes on it all the way around. You think, right, if I get a bit of wire and I bend it around the edge of it like a wheelbarrow, and I roll it along, oh, that's funny. Now suddenly I've got a little wheelbarrow that's making lots of dents. And if I put a ruler up against the side of my submarine and I run this wheel up it, I've suddenly got 2,000 rivets. rub some different coloured powder paint into them, rub it down with your finger so it looks as if they've all sort of dribbled a bit with all the water. But boom, you know, it was that simple, but that effective, really. But every day you picked up something, and Derek was always telling you to look outside the box, look beyond what you're doing. Don't think just because you've got that in front of you that it would look like that. Anything could be converted into anything. So we go into Woolworths in Slough High Street and we buy, you know, 50, whatever it was, egg cups and 20 salt cellars and whatever, and we go to the checkout and they look at you as if you're absolutely mad. And when we got that, we knew that we were sticking that one on that one, that one on that one, turn it upside down, spray it all silver, and you had exactly what you were looking for, really. And we did that over and over again. We did it in, I think it was Woolworths, when we did the Mistron complex, and it needed this city to be built. Within 24 hours, had to build Mistron City. And it had to look futuristic, it had to this. And I think I went with Mike into Slough High Street. We went into Woolworths there, and we bought all these 1960s lampshades, which were all very pretty, futuristic perspex. Took them back, stuck them on the set, put some light bulbs underneath them, on and on, boom, 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 boom. To me, they're still light, but they're still lampshades. But, you know, we built the set from nothing when nobody would have ever dreamed. You wouldn't have gone to 2001 and somebody said, go to Woolworths and buy some lampshades. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened that way. They would have spent 6 months building Mistron City. But we didn't have time, we didn't have money, so look outside the box and see what you can find, really.
Did you always get it right? Were there times when someone said, no, this is not what I want?
Yes, I mean, I had my famous one where I was given the job to build a complete wall of icebergs behind the ship that was coming through, might be Captain Scarlet or Joe Nady, and the boat had to come through in the water tank, which we had there all the time. And there was no problem, we just had this huge wall of icebergs that were made out of, we had sheets of blocks of polystyrene that were 8 feet by 4 feet by probably 2 feet thick, and we'd have loads of them delivered, and you'd just attack them with a claw hammer, attack, and then you'd have hot wire and you'd smooth off some of the edges with hot wire, and then you'd take the blowtorch to it and you'd smooth them all down with the blowtorch. They're white anyway, but you put some extra white on. And then when I put them on the set, the director was more than happy, we filmed it, and I was quite happy, although I hadn't looked at photographs of icebergs, because where can you look at photographs of an iceberg? I mean, you couldn't. Until suddenly the shot was finished on the screen, dead silence, and then Derek being Derek, and he was a real gentleman, and he never raised his voice ever as far as I'm concerned, just suddenly said from the back of the theatre, who made the icebergs? And at that point you just knew, you didn't even have to turn around and look, he didn't say another word, you just knew that he wasn't happy with what you had done, and you had to do it better or something different. I mean, probably kept the icebergs in the shot, but it was enough to spur you on to say, next time I'll do it better. And that was the incredible feeling that was built into this team, 18 of us at the most at any one time, to actually try and come up with something that was better than everybody else. Whereas in the modern film studio, everybody keeps something secret, and they all try and do it one stage better than anybody else does. And I'm not going to tell you how I did that, because whereas there everybody shared it, and we all shared what we were doing, and said, why don't we do it that way? How about if we tried that? And nobody was too strict to say, so you can't do that. So it made it quite a challenge, but yeah, Derek was the one that you went by, so if Derek raised his voice at all, then you were really in trouble. But he was very, very, very nice gentleman.
I hear it was very much a family environment to work in.
Yes, incredibly. I mean, it was, you would think nothing of the weekend, say, when you do, I'm coming to your wedding tomorrow, aren't I? Or we're going to the christening of your daughter, or I'm coming for a meal tonight at your house. I mean, it was that type of thing. We all got in a coach one night and went to Wembley Stadium and watched an England game. you know, it's just something we did. We stayed together. I mean, I was living in my home was in Essex, so I had to get a flat in Maidenhead, and so I lived in Maidenhead for most of the time we worked in the studios, which was obviously more convenient for getting here. But the whole idea of what you did in the evenings or what you did at weekends was never a point of going anywhere and sort of not joining in with what was going on. And even, I mean, there was a classic bit where Mike Trim and myself and a couple of other guys were bored on a Saturday, and we went up to Box Hill and we did some filming of our own on a 8mm black and white film, something to do. I mean, when the kids in the film industry that are working Monday to Friday go and make their own film with 8mm on a Saturday morning, it was that sort of feeling that was born into you, really.
I bet it made it so much harder then when everything went crashing down.
Terrible. I mean, at the end of 1969 there was a tremendous lull in the film industry. Lou Grade had pulled the stops on everything. He just lost a fortune, I think, on racing the Titanic. Wasn't in the best of moods. Nobody was employing anybody. We were all obviously union members, and you'd get union sheets round with all the jobs on where you could go and work, 2 weeks work here, 4 weeks work there. And boom, it was just nothing. There was nothing available. Nobody was putting any money into the British film industry in 1970 whatsoever. So it crashed on its knees. And of course, Lou, having a major financial investment, just pulled the plug and said, right, you know, that can go. So it became a big shock that not only did the studios go, because I thought we'd be there forever, but there was nothing else out there to grab hold of. I mean, I find something else and I was quite happy, but within sort of a few months, not in the industry, but then Ken Holt rang me up out the blue and said, oh, we'd like you to work on special effects, do special effects for Face 1999. And I thought, oh dear, how long is this going to... He said, well, it's at Pinewood, and it's just a few weeks' work probably, until they decide whether it's going to go ahead or not. Yeah. Got going away over there for 2 weeks. I've just started another job which I like. Do I, don't I? My heart is in the industry, but there's no industry there. And Ken Holt couldn't, as manager of the project, couldn't guarantee me more than a few weeks' work. And I turned it down, and I said, no, I'll give it up. And of course, Space 99 went on for about 3 years, I think, after that. So, you know, life comes and goes and changes, but there's probably not a lot of it that I would change if I had the choice.
So what was it like to work for Derek Meddings?
Derek, he was a fantastic guy to work for. He was very much a sort of father figure to me. Derek would say pick on me. I don't know what it was, but I was the youngest member of his elite team. There were about, say, 18 of us, and I think Derek and I sort of gelled. And Derek would come in the morning and say, what are you orders today, Alan? And I'd say, I've got this to do, but... He'd say, well, you come with me, I need some help on picking up some explosives. Okay, so, you know, we'd go out, we'd get in Derek's Mercedes, I think it was in those days, blue Mercedes, and we'd drive right the way across London, and we'd go somewhere, and we'd pick up this brand new explosive that nobody's ever heard of before, called Cortex. And a great lump of it, and yeah, we'll have that, and get in the car and you put it on my lap, and we'd then drive right the way through London, past Houses of Parliament and so on, with this lump of Cortex sitting on my lap. You said, don't worry, because it can't go off unless you put charges into it. You have to put charges into it to make it explode. And okay, right. And I think it was about 3 weeks afterwards that Derek came and said, you know that Cortex we bought? I just realised it can be set off by radio waves. So, yeah, Derek and I had a bonding that was quite sort of special. And there were times like that you know, you remember and you laugh about and you think, well, you know, the House of Parliament wouldn't have been here if things had gone wrong. But Derek was such a creative person, such a perfectionist, really. I mean, he went on to do Bond and everything else. He was a real perfectionist in what he did. And although he came in and he was the right-hand man in the studio, I mean, Derek Meddings, Sylvia Anderson, Barry Gray, I mean, without those sort of three, you wouldn't have had the studios. They were the most creative people, I think, in the whole studio, without any doubt. And Derek threw everything at it. Every vehicle that was designed, it was Derek's, and maybe began Mike Trim's designs as well. But Derek designed everything. Derek designed what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, and Tracy Island and this vehicle and that vehicle. Nobody realised that it all came from Derek's drawings. It wasn't anybody else's. He not only did it, but he had a very strong passion for what he was doing. So he knew exactly what he wanted to achieve at the end of the day. And because he was a gentleman, he was very quiet, very, 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 very pleasant all the time. It was just a pleasure to work for him. You normally expected most film directors, as it were, to be shouting their heads off all the time, actually. But Derek had that way of just making you feel that little bit sort of special or out of place or whatever it might have been without saying a word. And I think that was quite a magical thing that he had. Very sad loss to the industry when he died so young, really, on the Bond films.
You've mentioned about the explosives, and you mentioned about setting fire to polystyrene. That building must have been a tinderbox for potential fires.
But there's the studios.
Yeah.
Oh, not half. Yes, really. I mean, we had it. I think we had an explosion to make one day. We had. I think it was the only day that Lou Gray was coming around the studios with a team of people, and they decided to set up a special shot so that it would look a lovely explosion. And they got overexcited about it, and they put far too much explosives in the charge. So when the bang went off, not only did everybody get covered, but the ceiling was on fire inside the building, which wasn't too good really for Lou Gray visiting. But yeah, there were a lot of accidents, and there was no health and safety sort of precautions whatsoever. I mean, the amount of poisonous gases we must have consumed, and the balls of fire that people were sort of caught up in. And we did a shot for Crossfire for one of Lou Gray's films, and we had a shot where very, very quickly we had a helicopter coming across, had a guy hanging on a rope, the guy had to be towed up into the helicopter, and the baddies escaped, no problem whatsoever. But as the helicopter was going away with this guy hanging on the rope, which was all on live action, the helicopter went over some electric pylons, and the electricity on the pylons caught the cable right at the bottom, and the cable burnt and then went up and the whole helicopter blew up. Well, they filmed that right up to the very last shot they could do, possibly in live action, and then they gave us the last frame, and we had to match that last frame perfectly, the scenery, this one and everything. And we had the helicopter and it was all ready, and we had the guy on the rope, and the rope had a charge on it at the bottom, so it lit at the bottom and started burning all the way up, which looked good. We had wires down to the helicopter rotors, we had electricity running to front and back to the helicopter for that. We had wires down with charges ready to explode the helicopter. So there's about like 10, 12 wires running into this helicopter, all for different parts that had to sort of happen. And all that had to happen basically was a guy standing there holding the helicopter, and then on the shout of action he runs away, leaves the helicopter rotating, action, bang, bang, crash, bang, boom. But unfortunately, as he let go of it, the whole helicopter just went completely round, all the wires tangled up, all the electricity ran down, all the cables, and the whole lot just went bang in 2 seconds, right in front of the chap's face. And he got quite badly burned and so on. So the next time we did it, he wore glasses. But there wasn't really any great. I mean, one day again, I remember some guys were experimenting with an explosion out in our, what we called the football field out the back. And we'd gone in after a lunch break, and they decided to stay outside and see whether this explosion, whether it was big enough to move certain things. So they put the explosion in the earth, without any authority whatsoever. and put loads of bricks on top of it. And then we all went in and we were filming, 20 minutes into filming, suddenly there was a great big bang, and all these bricks came through the roof, and there's the studio. And the chap was sacked.
So did the studio actually have any nominated firefighters? Or was it just all hands to the pump?
No, it's all I mean, we had little fire extinguishers around. You never allowed to touch those until everything was supposed to be destroyed anyway. But yeah, everybody was rushing with a fire extinguisher once cut was shouted so they couldn't save a set. But there was no... Fire was it was very dangerous, but fire and water was even worse. So if we were filming in a water tank and you had a huge building, size bigger than this room, filled with a water tank 4 feet deep, and you built a set in the middle of it, you've got these 10 kilowatt lamps all the way around the edge of the lamp, all the way around the edge of the water, and a massive explosion. And suddenly bang, yes, okay, action, and this whole whatever it is in the middle explodes, and the water just goes straight onto these 10 kilowatt lamps, and the glass, which is that thick on these lamps, just explode and shatter everywhere, and you're underneath it, you know, waving a dustbin lid, trying to make the smoke go in the right direction and so on. So yeah, water and electricity was really, really dangerous, and we tried not to sort of get too near to the water tank when you know there was going to be a big fiery bang.
Obviously, nowadays, if this sort of thing was being done, it'd be done with CGI.
Mm.
Do you think you would have got into CGI if you had it all again?
I think the time I lived at the studios was magical in that it was hands-on only. If you couldn't make it work with your hands, it didn't work, and there was no argument after that, because all the things that everybody takes for granted now as being there weren't there. So there was no other option. You didn't say, oh, I wish I could use a computer, because nobody knew what a computer was in 1964, whatever it was. So it's a different world altogether, and I don't think that if I had probably been brought up in this world and been brought up, I mean, I still use computers, I love doing work on computers, but I could never ever, I don't think, achieve half of what the students of today and the younger people are doing on computers, because they've been brought through that sort of different childhood, really. My childhood, when you look back, I mean, what was successful in 1950? Andy Pandy, the Wooden Tops, you know, it was all string puppets, everything was string puppets. So to have this new series that was better looking string puppets and better action string puppets was acceptable, really. And it wasn't until suddenly somebody said, we don't need string puppets anymore, we've got computers and CGI, that the world sort of changed on creativity. And I was a bit shocked, really, because when I first went to the studios, I was 19, I used to spend every lunch hour in the editing suite in one of the buildings. And you'd go in and there's a whole row of booths, and there's all these different guys sitting in their booths, all running the film up and down, and you've got Jeff Tracy's voice going forward and backwards as they're editing and cutting. And I used to sit there at lunchtime and watch and learn and try and learn the industry, because I was learning the film industry. And of course, completely everything that I knew and I learned has gone, doesn't exist. You wouldn't dream of using that, you couldn't possibly do it that way. Where's the camera? Well, it's behind that matchbox, you know. I mean, the whole thing has just completely changed into a different world. Not for the worst, but it wasn't the film industry that I was prepared to be sort of growing into and learning all about. It's gone, and I'm happy I lived through the period that, still living, but through the period that actually I did live through, when it was a very, very creative, hands-on sort of work, really.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
How many Thunderbird 2 models did you get to work on? How many were there?
How many Thunderbird models?
Yeah, Thunderbird 2.
Thunderbird 2. We had quite a few of them, because they kept falling off the wire and breaking all the time. So I mean, a typical example would be a Thunderbird 2 would fall off its wires. It was very, very heavy for the wires it was on. And if Peter Ragg was flying, which is, he nearly flew everything to the studios, and he went on to work on Blake Seven and Doctor Who when the studios closed. If a Thunderbird 2 fell off its wires, normally they'd break the wings off, and sometimes you'd use green plasticine and just stick the thing back with that until they've finished filming 10 minutes later, and then you can bring the model in, strip it down, and you've got time to stick it all back on properly. But there's no way that you could actually have spent time mending that model when it broke during filming, because the whole film crew was standing there waiting for it. So it was a lot of makeshift and mend a lot of the time, and a lot of vehicles were much, much more vulnerable than others in braking. Thunderbird 2 was just particularly very, very heavy, very difficult, and had its lovely wings that kept snapping off, really.
You had various sizes of them as well, didn't you?
A lot of sizes, yes. I mean, that was quite clever because the sort of scale of filming was quite tight. So if we needed a shot where Thunderbird 1 and Thunderbird 2 were on a particular scene, but Thunderbird 2 was supposed to be 2 miles away. I mean, it was only 6 inches away, but it was a quarter of the size, so that it looked like it was, and of course, focus-wise, you could focus on the two of them together rather than if they were miles apart. So the different models made perspective change quite drastically, and gave us a lot more sort of freedom, I suppose, to create shots that you would have needed a studio 4 times the size to have done. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
In the launch sequence of Thunderbird 1, I guess the bottom is that second, is that a lemon squeeze?
Yes.
And that probably did come from Woolworths.
When that was originally put together, it's mainly, if you look at the that Thunderbird 2, that Thunderbird 1 hanger, it's covered in Perspex Airfix kits. You can go and pick out all the girder bits, all the girder bridge, all the footbridge bits, and I can see every single bit of Airfix that's on there. But when I think Mike Trim was working on it and putting it together, you want a great big fan and extractor in this sort of underground sort of cavern, as it were. What better than this great big thing that looks like an underground fan, and that's exactly what it looks like until everybody tells you it's a lemon squeezer, really. And it rather sort of kills it flat, and I think it's been a standing joke with Mike Trim ever since, really, the famous lemon squeezer. But once it's there and it's filmed, you can't do anything about it. You can't suddenly take it out and say, oh, you need to put something else in instead. But it looks realistic. It's just that we know it's a lemon squeezer.
There's quite a few of the, like, when you see backgrounds when they've got things with like needles, electric needles, they were actually genuine components of like contemporary size, weren't they? Even though you've got smaller puppets in front of them, because they're quite large.
Well, you've got needles. Yes, well, they would be, depending if it was a real hand, because we got into lots of trouble with that. We were using just anybody's hand in the studio to do different things. So over on the puppet set, if they needed somebody to come in and pick up a bottle and put it down again, they'd say, well, you're as good as anybody, pick it up, put it down again. And then suddenly the unions came in and said, oh, no, you can't do that, you've got to have a proper union-employed person to pick it up. Somebody who's got so things got a bit slower then, and we had to do things different ways. But whenever you use, we use so much stuff that when you look at it now, just cooker knobs and bits of machinery from fridges and cookers from 1950 and 60, and they're so obvious now, and great big signs of on, off, and up and down, and all the things that you wouldn't have on a spaceship sort of model. But it worked because it was for what it was for. It was for the kids loved it, and we never questioned the fact that it may have looked real, may not look real. I mean, it looked exciting, and if it cut into the film properly, it worked.
Well, my grandson is 2.5, he's watching it now.
Really?
He loves it, so it'll just go on forever.
Right. It's interesting because, I mean, you've got so many brilliant programs out there now, and yet, they're brilliant for their own reasons. And I tend to think that the modern child isn't interested in a puppet series. It wouldn't have the appeal. It would look 1950s perhaps to them. And it's lovely to know that somebody can still watch it and still enjoy it, really, and still get some, well, excitement and satisfaction. A lot of the excitement of Thunderbirds came by mistake. I mean, I don't want to bore you, but Thunderbirds wouldn't have been half the success without the mistakes that Lou Gray made, because when we made Thunderbirds, and we were into, I think, about episode 6, and Lou Gray had said, just go away and make it, doesn't matter what it costs. I mean, no one in the right mind will put the money into it that Lou Gray put into Thunderbirds. Then I think after about 6 episodes, he saw the first one, and he was so totally gobsmacked with it. He said, you know, this isn't a television series, this is a feature film, and I want every episode to be an hour. And they said, well, we've already completed 6, 7 episodes, they're all in the can, all ready to be shown. Script goes from A to B, you know, what can you do with that? Pad it out with special effects, put loads of special effects in, you know, make the rocket go from there to there, fall off the bridge, this is. And so suddenly, every episode became almost half an hour of special effects packed into what was really a dialogue programme of puppets. And that to me was the magic that captured the children, because they love seeing the Empire State Building being moved along, and then it takes 5 minutes to do it, and that Barry Gray's music is making it magical. But that wasn't there before Lou Gray said, you must extend every programme. And they didn't change the scripts, they just padded and padded with special effects. So you've got fire flash sort of landing with the wheels on episode 1. I mean, all that was added afterwards, because we needed to pad something out. And it goes on, and the tension there, will it work, won't it work, will it work? You get absorbed by that. And that was the magical mistake that made Thunderbirds, I think, sort of the ultimate success that it was.
I was actually watching, funny enough, that episode today with the Empire State Building.
Right.
And at the beginning, Thunderbird 2 gets shot down, and they have to move Thunderbird 4 by other means. So was that all added in as a result of having the series out?
Yeah, a lot of it was. I mean, obviously there were certain special effects shots had to be built into the original script. But when then they had to pad them, they went back and had to add film, just add more film. So, you know, sets were brought back, and sometimes some of the sets were brought back and they weren't the original sets almost, and they were repainted because they got broken or whatever. And you look and you see quite a bit of differences in certain things. Even more so between the feature films and the television series. If you look at the bay overlooking Thunderbird 2 hangar, with all the windows in it, and Thunderbird 2 comes out and there's the bay above it and all the windows. On the feature films you'll find there's about 12 windows, and on the television series you'll find there's about 32 windows. And that's because it all had to be remade for wide-angle cinema scope, which we didn't have, obviously, when it was shot, 2 years before, and it all got broken up in the corner of the studio. So, yeah, it's, if you're clever, you can figure all those things out.
Any other questions? Well, in that case, I think... Oh, one from the left.
What did you go on to do after Thunderbirds and...
After Thunderbirds? Well, as I said, when Thunderbirds finished, I took a bit of time out for probably a couple of months, and then I was offered a job as a graphic designer with a newspaper company, which meant computer work. Computers have been invented now, and it was something a bit exciting. There was no work in the industry. You couldn't really get a job, few and far between. I'd moved back over to Essex, so obviously my links now are broken on this side of London. And so I accepted this job in this newspaper company, which I really, really enjoyed, until I got this phone call, to say, from Ken Holt, who said, come and work on Space 1999. It all starts in 2 weeks' time, and it's about 2 or 3 weeks' work. And cut a long story short ago, I turned that down, and carried on working, and I opened up eventually my own advertising agency for 20 years, employed about 20 people, and was very successful.
Excellent. Well done.
But I missed the industry. But it's not the industry I knew, that's the trouble. I could walk into a studio now and I wouldn't know where I was. You know. I can't watch a programme, certainly a feature film, without being behind the camera still. I still stand there and I can see the film crew and I can see the stuntmen and I can see everything else, and everybody's waving things to make it work, and it sort of spoils it for me because I'm behind the camera all the time. It's very difficult to get the other side of the camera because I know how that was done and how that was done, and it spoils it. But I wouldn't know the industry, and I don't know whether it would know me either. That's the trouble. You know, it's moved on so much in 60 years. It really has.
I liked Stingray.
You like Stingray? Well, that's classical. They're absolutely classical puppets. I mean, you can't almost do better other than Thunderbirds, because Stingray had everything that the kids wanted to see.
Yeah.
And we had the underwater adventures, which were probably quite exciting. I think underwater was much more exciting than being in space, really. It was more fun. We had a lot more fun shooting underwater shots than we did shooting space shots. But yeah, time moved on, but that was a great series, and Lou Gray made an awful lot of money selling Stingray around the world, which is why he didn't hesitate when he wanted to put money into the next thing, which was Thunderbirds.
Excellent, thank you.
Well, I think it's a case of saying thank you to Alan, and
Well,
that's been fascinating. So, thank you, Alan.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
So, just a note to say that we are open again tomorrow. Also, at the end of September, we are organising a